Crocodilians are often touted as living fossils, a moniker that they acquire from their perceived similarities to their long-gone ancestors. Of course, this is kind of preposterous. While the basic crocodilian niche of aquatic ambush hunter has been around since the Carboniferous, crocodilomorphs didn't start out that way, and certainly didn't stay that way. Here in the Eckar formation of Niger, among the mangrove swamps that meandered throughout the landscape, one snaggletooth predator stood out from the rest: the Bor Croc. Known only from a single skull, Kaprosuchus has left its mark in the mind of many a paleo enthusiast. Equipped with 5 sets of saber teeth and a truly bizarre skull morphology, the Bor Croc is quite the intriguing pseudopsuchian. First things first, what am I even gonna paint? I knew I wanted a simple shot of the head without too much else, just a nice portrait. I sketched a bunch of different poses, but ultimately settled for this one, before sketching it for real on the canvas. Now, the sketch isn't actually that accurate, but we'll touch on that later. Something that a lot of skilled painters will do is an underpainting, just more so on the mood you want to convey. I used a dark reddish color not only because it's the opposite of green in a traditional color wheel, but also to bring out depth in the painting that might be absent without it. Of course, this didn't go according to plan at all, and I nearly ruined the painting in the process.
Anyhow, I'm gonna go over it with paint and just redo the outline, which is fine.
Honestly, it could have been worse, and I definitely know now to take it slow and layer. What the hell was I thinking?
We saved it, boys! Wahoo! I think I'm ready to start off with actual color.
And it might be good to figure out what Kaprosuchus was doing back in the Cretaceous. For many years, Kaprosuchus was thought to be a terrestrial predator, and this has been evident in its appearances in media. We see that it's typically a long-legged land animal, giving similar vibes to the preceding Rawisuchians and preceding Sebekids, the true apex land crocs. The reason for this came from anatomical quirks in the skull. According to the crown form and other factors of dentition, the authors describing the animal considered its main diet to have been large terrestrial dinosaurs. The orbits were subcircular in shape and were angled anteriorly. This would imply a degree of stereoscopic vision that's unusual for its clade. The relatively deep skull compared to the dorsal-ventrally flattened ones of other crocodilomorphs also suggested a terrestrial affinity. This was challenged in more recent years as the other features of the skull were considered and put into the general trends we see in crocodilomorphs. Wilberg and co-authors released a 2019 paper looking at the evolutionary history in Crocodilomorpha as it related to habitat shifts. They found that some Gondwanan taxa, previously considered terrestrial, had traits in line with semi-aquatic forms. The two big ones being the tube-like snouts, which is found in semi-aquatic relatives, as well as the orbits being at the top of the skull. These are adaptations crocs have to remain submerged and almost completely be invisible, while being able to breathe and see their surroundings. For now, it remains ambiguous until we find any post-cranial material, but I think it's more of a reason to not bother with painting the body, because what a mess that would be. Unlike many other animals, modern crocodilians have very conservative color palettes that remain consistent throughout their various clades. A greenish-grayish color scheme seems to be just perfect for the ambush aquatic predator niche, regardless of continent or habitat. So naturally, I wanted to work off of something like that. I chose 2 caimans for this because I like caimans, and they have the most color diversity. Of course, I forgot about the false gavial before recording this, but oh well. Many times in juvenile crocs and gators, patterning and banding will be visible that lends to a more striking appearance. This changes as the animal gets older, and generally speaking, the darker and plainer a reptile, the more aged it is. An exception to losing its depth of pattern is the Yakare caiman, but since this was in fact not a Yakare caiman, I offset it with the dark grays and blacks of a black caiman and came up with a color scheme I think would befit a Bor Croc. Here, I painted the background a tealish, cyanish, bluish, turquoise-ish paint. Something that both stood out from the greens and yellows while also contrasting with the red behind it. As in more modern color wheels, cyan is actually the opposite of red, and you can see that when you change something to its negative. Detailing was quite tricky and a bit unintuitive. Most people think that crocs have scales on their face, and in many photos it really looks that way. This isn't the case, however. They actually have a keratin sheath over their skulls that cracks with age. This gives a very convincing impression of scales without technically being them. This was one reason Cathedral 2017 was scrutinized, comparing the proposed sensory scales on Dinosaurs to those of crocs, which don't really exist. I made sure that these cracks were noticeable, along with incorporating colors from the background into the skin to make the two more homogeneous and convincing, as keratin is glossy in texture and would have reflected some of this. Now, when I say my sketch wasn't accurate, here's what I mean. I put in the wrong number of teeth in the wrong areas. I also referenced caimans maybe a bit too much, because this skull looks less like this and more like this. So I ran through and fixed these areas along with adding some final touches.